I turned 16 just a week ago, and instead of the joy and celebration that a birthday should bring, I experienced one of the most heartbreaking betrayals of my young life. On the morning of my birthday, with no party, no heartfelt wishes, and barely a word of genuine care from my parents, they sat me down and informed me that I was no longer welcome in my own home. Their reason was as cold as it was selfish. My older sister Amanda, who at 22 has always been their golden child, is now 7 months pregnant. In our spacious 4-bedroom house, my parents decided that the extra room was to be dedicated to Amanda's upcoming baby. I was told that I must pack my belongings and leave to live with my aunt, a decision that stung deeply given that I had always been treated with only the bare minimum of care and attention. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share for support of my channel. I sat there, stunned and speechless, as my parents explained their plan in a tone that brooked no argument. They claimed I was old enough to move out, even though I had barely experienced the warmth of a loving family. Their words, delivered with a chilling finality, left no room for any hope that this might be a cruel joke or an elaborate prank. Instead, the silence that followed their explanation was heavy with the realization that I was being cast aside once more. Despite their assurance that they would continue covering all my expenses until I turned 18, the fact remained that I was being discarded like an inconvenience, sacrificed for the sake of making room for someone they favored far more. Desperate for any sliver of empathy, I asked why they couldn't simply repurpose the guest room for the nursery, but after a hesitant pause, they revealed that the guest room had already been promised to Amanda's boyfriend. This confession stung all the more, exposing how meticulously they had planned to prioritize Amanda and her new life over my well-being. As the weight of their decision sank in, I felt a cold rain. Upon arriving at my aunt's house, the contrast in warmth was immediately apparent. My aunt welcomed me with genuine happiness and open arms, a stark difference from the indifference I had endured at home. In the safety of her embrace, I finally felt seen and valued, something I had longed for my entire life. After settling in, I confided in her about the painful events of that morning. Her initial shock was palpable. She even asked me to repeat every detail to make sure she understood the full extent of the betrayal. As I recounted how my parents had callously prioritized Amanda's comfort and convenience over mine, her smile dissolved into a deep frown. Abruptly, she excused herself to make a phone call in another room, and after a long, tense silence, I began to hear her raising her voice, a sound so uncharacteristic of the soft-spoken, gentle woman I knew that I immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. When my aunt returned, her face was flushed with anger and disappointment, and it soon became clear that my parents had crossed a line. My father had somehow managed to twist the story, falsely claiming that I had suggested the arrangement in order to benefit Amanda's baby. This revelation shocked me to my core. Not only had they treated me as a secondary concern all these years, but they had now stooped to manipulating the truth to serve their own selfish interests. My aunt, a single woman in her late 30s who had no plans for marriage or children, had graciously taken me in as though I were nothing more than a temporary roommate. Despite the financial ease it offered her, since my father was set to cover all my needs, she had believed I was happy with the arrangement. Learning that my parents had deceitfully misrepresented the situation to her felt like yet another cruel twist in an already painful saga. The mounting injustice pushed me to take drastic action. In a moment of raw vulnerability and frustration, I decided to expose my parents' neglect online. I waited until my aunt had gone off to take a nap, and then I poured out my heart into a lengthy post. I detailed not only the events of that fateful birthday morning but also the years of being treated as an afterthought, a second-class citizen in my own home. As I typed, tears blurred my vision, and the weight of years of neglect and isolation overwhelmed me. When I finally hit post, the surge of emotions was almost too much to bear, and I turned off my phone, terrified of the inevitable repercussions that would follow. The silence that followed was oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional sound of my aunt's concerned movements. It wasn't long before reality came crashing down as I received a flood of messages from my family. Within an hour, texts poured in from my parents, and even my sister. While many relatives expressed support and offered comforting words, assuring me that I wasn't alone, my parents' messages were laced with venom. My father's texts, in particular, were scathing. He hurled hurtful words at me, including a chilling statement that he wished I'd never been born. My mother's messages echoed his cruelty, leaving me feeling utterly abandoned. Even my sister, though more reserved in her approach, reached out with a terse message suggesting she wanted to speak in person. Overwhelmed and unsure how to respond, I kept my phone aside, choosing silence over confrontation as I tried to process the barrage of negativity. The situation escalated further when, a few days later, my parents unexpectedly showed up outside my school. They appeared furious, and the atmosphere was charged with tension. My friends, who were well aware of the toxic family dynamics, formed a protective circle around me as my parents shouted my name, demanding that I come with them. Gathering every ounce of courage, I stepped forward and told them in no uncertain terms that I no longer wanted any association with them. Their reaction was immediate and unyielding. They insisted that I come home right away. Their sudden change in attitude struck me as nothing more than a desperate attempt to salvage their tarnished reputation, especially after the fallout from my online post had reached my affluent grandparents. These grandparents had threatened my father with the loss of his inheritance unless he treated me with the love and respect I deserved. Clearly, my parents were motivated more by self-interest than genuine concern for my well-being. Refusing to be manipulated any longer, I stood my ground and refused to accompany them. Even as they continued to scream and plead, I calmly boarded the bus back to my aunt's house, determined to forge my own path. Once safely at my aunt's, I recounted the ordeal at school. Her reaction was a mix of annoyance and resolve. She informed me that she had already contacted her lawyer to explore our legal options regarding my custody. Despite my parents retaining their legal rights over me, it was becoming increasingly clear that if I were to continue living in an environment where I felt unwanted and neglected, a change in custody was the only way forward. I even took a moment to call my grandparents to express my gratitude for their intervention, while also reaffirming my determination not to return to the suffocating home I had known all my life. Not long after, my sister reached out again via text, requesting that we meet in person. Our relationship had always been complicated, distant due to the significant age gap and marred by the realization that she had, in her own way, allowed this cruel arrangement to happen. Initially, I hesitated, unsure of how to engage with her after all that had transpired. But curiosity and the faint hope of reconciliation eventually led me to call her. To my surprise, she revealed that she was currently living with her boyfriend and was unwell, which prevented her from going out. Instead, she wanted me to come over so we could discuss everything in a more relaxed, private setting. When I arrived, she began by apologizing for never defending me against our parents' blatant favoritism. She admitted that while she had never treated me with overt cruelty, her silence and indifference had effectively contributed to the neglect I had endured. She expressed regret over the fact that our parents had always celebrated her achievements and ignored mine, leaving me feeling like the least important member of our family. Her apology was a small comfort in the midst of the chaos. We spoke candidly about the dynamics that had led to my expulsion from the family home, and she admitted that she had been as shocked as I was upon learning about the plan to kick me out to accommodate the new baby. According to her, our parents had never discussed any such arrangement with her, and she had always assumed that we would continue living together until the baby was born. In a fit of anger and frustration, she had even confronted them about the situation when she learned the truth, resulting in a huge argument that left our family even more fractured. Despite the tension between us, her willingness to finally acknowledge her shortcomings and promise to be there for me in the future offered a glimmer of hope amidst the lingering bitterness. In the days that followed, the fallout from my online post continued to reshape my life. I found solace in the support of relatives who had reached out, offering their unconditional backing and assuring me that I wasn't alone. However, my parents' subsequent email, disappointing and measured, advised me that there was no need to make our family matters public, as word of the incident had already spread, including reaching my grandparents. They warned that the post had not only stirred up internal strife but had also cast a shadow on their professional lives, with even coworkers beginning to notice the scandal. Despite their attempt to downplay the severity of the situation, it was clear that my actions had exposed a deep-rooted neglect that could no longer be ignored. The repercussions of my actions and the ensuing family drama forced me to take a stand. I decided to block my parents on all communication channels, severing the already tenuous connection that had existed between us. I had long since concluded that nothing I said or did could ever make them love me the way I deserved to be loved. My aunt, now my safe haven, supported my decision implicitly, and over the next several days, I gradually distanced myself from my toxic parental figures. Yet, even in the midst of this newfound freedom, my parents' persistence reared its ugly head when they once again tried to coerce me into returning home, a move that seemed designed solely to salvage their inheritance rather than to mend our fractured family bond. When they showed up outside my school again, determined to reclaim me by leveraging the threat of losing their fortune, I once more refused to be drawn back into their manipulative orbit. Standing up to them, I declared in no uncertain terms that I cared nothing for their promises or their inheritance schemes. As they continued to shout and implore me, I calmly took the bus back to my aunt's house, resolutely choosing the freedom and security of an environment where I was finally valued. Later that day, I relayed every detail to my aunt, who, equally incensed by my parents' actions, informed me that she had already initiated legal proceedings to transfer custody over to her. This legal maneuver, while fraught with challenges given that my parents still retained their rights, represented the best chance for me to escape the perpetual neglect and indifference that had defined my life until now. Over time, the situation began to stabilize, and I even learned that my grandparents, who had always held considerable influence due to their wealth, had played a pivotal role in pressuring my parents. They made it abundantly clear that if my parents continued to mistreat me, they risked forfeiting their entire inheritance. Faced with such an ultimatum, my parents ultimately chose to relinquish their parental rights in exchange for retaining half of their expected inheritance. Although this decision felt like a small victory, it also confirmed what I had suspected all along, that I was merely a pawn in their game of appearances and self-interest. In the midst of all this, my sister continued to maintain sporadic contact with me, even as my parents tried in vain to mend their relationship with her before her baby's arrival. She insisted on having her space and firmly told them to stop pestering her on a daily basis. Now, as I reflect on the whirlwind of events, from the heart-wrenching moment of being cast out on my birthday, to the emotional catharsis of airing my family's neglect online, to the eventual legal battles over custody, I feel a bittersweet mix of liberation and sorrow. I finally have a home where I am not constantly reminded of being unwanted, a sanctuary where my aunt's genuine care fills the void left by my parents' indifference. Though the journey has been tumultuous and painful, I now stand at the threshold of a future where I can reclaim my identity and rebuild my life on my own terms. Every step, every tear, and every word of defiance has led me to this moment of liberation, a moment that, despite its scars, shines with the promise of a brighter, more compassionate tomorrow.